Welcome to the licensee section. This is part 2 of our look at Marvel Comics. Last month we covered Star Wars Weekly UK, and this month we look at the releases in the United States. Believe it or not, there is likely to be a part 3 covering the rest of the world.
Excelsior!
Lucasfilm publicity supervisor Charles Lippincott approached Stan Lee at Marvel in 1975 about publishing a Star Wars comic book prior to the film's release. Lee initially declined to consider such a proposal until the film was completed, and was only persuaded otherwise in a second meeting arranged by Roy Thomas, who wanted to edit the series. Here's Charles in his own words from an interview he did with Rebel Force Radio.
Stan acts like that was an immediate thing that happened, which of course it wasn't. And Roy Thomas deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Stan wasn't going to have a meeting with me, and he set it up. Roy, who's a great, great person, really came through. He loved the idea. He wanted to be the editor. He wanted to be the writer, and he convinced Stan that it would work. And the real problem, I think, in some ways, was I didn't want one comic book, and I didn't want 2 comic books, what Dell did sometimes, or somebody else did. Gold Key, maybe it was. I wanted 5 to 6 comic books telling the story of the film. So that was a bit of a hard sell at first. And I wanted at least 3 issues out before the film came out. And nobody had done that up to that time. Roy said he would stand behind it, that I was right, and it would work out, and it did. We didn't sell the first issue out. The second issue came close to selling out, and it sold out every issue from the third on. And I'm sure they backsold issues because they were doing reprints by the time the film came out.
Since movie tie-in comics rarely sold well, Lee negotiated a publishing arrangement which gave no royalties to Lucasfilm until sales exceeded 100,000 copies. Roy Thomas and artist Howard Chaykin adapted the events of the original film in issues 1 to 6 of Star Wars, with the first issue released for sale on April 12, 1977. According to former Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, the healthy sales of Star Wars comics saved Marvel financially in 1977 and 1978. Writer Archie Goodwin and artist Carmine Infantino took over the series as of issue 11 in May 1978. The series was one of the industry's top-selling titles in 1979 and 1980. The 100,000 copy sales quota was surpassed quickly, allowing Lippincott to renegotiate the royalty arrangements.
Excelsior!
The comic itself, the Star Wars Marvel comic, it was just the comic, so there wasn't a load of crappy stories that we had in the English ones. It was just the story itself, and it just folded through, and it was done. But there were 107 issues done. So that went from April 1977 to May 1986. It was a monthly comic, and it just ran all the way through, and it covered Empire Strikes Back as well. But it didn't cover Return of the Jedi, which was kind of odd. They did 4 comics that covered Return of the Jedi, but it didn't feature in the main range, even though that comic kept going. They did it separately. Why? I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Yeah,
they did. But yeah,
just assumed it was the start of a run.
But yeah, Return of the Jedi didn't feature in that main run. So it seems that 39 they start bringing the Empire Strikes Back in, and then that just ran through, telling those dreadful tales that we've all seen, or wonderful tales, or however you want to say it. The UK one, as we covered last month, is very, very much divided up. So we had that main run. We had 3 annuals. Now, in the States, I don't know where you guys collect comics, as in modern comics, but they do these things called annuals. They're not the annuals that we know and love over here, big hardback things. But they just do like, a comic series I'm collecting at the moment, Dr. Aphra. Every now and again, they'll just have an annual, which is just a similar floppy comic, and it would just be a one-off story, all self-contained. That's it, nothing else. And they called it an annual. And this run also had 3 annuals. They had the first one was December 1979. I think it was one just after Empire Strikes Back, and the last one December 1983. So so they just one-off floppies, which was nice, very nice. Does anyone collect any kind of American comics at all, just out of interest?
I've got a stack of Spider-Man and Daredevil, but no, I kind of inherited them from somewhere. I can't even remember where now. And there was a few sort of story arcs, and it was actually when the start of me collecting Star Wars. So I sold off any runs to pay for buying Star Wars stuff, as any sensible person would do. But I ended up keeping a few that weren't in runs, and I'm quite glad I did, because they're not the full stories, but they are nice items. And as I think we talked about last month, just the adverts and stuff like that in there, it's just very different from what we had in Britain, and it's nice things to look at. But I do wonder about putting together some, particularly Spider-Man or something, or the Fantastic Four, something like that I do have fond memories from as a kid, putting those runs together. But it's very expensive, very different from the British comic market, isn't it? The value of these early American.
Oh yeah. I mean, try to look around and find UK comics that go for ridiculous amounts of money. It's really hard. I mean, a lot of those sort of famous American Spider-Man and all that sort of stuff. And they did kind of like do British versions of them, and they just, they're just worth nothing at all. Not even the first print is worth anything. But in the States, those things go for, was it Action Comics #1 with Superman or whatever? And that goes for £1 million now, isn't it? That Action Comics #1, it's £1 million. If you want that comic, it's absolutely ridiculous. And some of those first appearances of various superheroes go for crazy cash. Here's one for Jason to start collecting, because I know he loves his bagged up comics. So they did actually do some reprints, comics in little bags. So these are some of the later reprints that came out. So they redid them and packed them up. That was issues 1 to 36. Because I want to see Jason on eBay in a minute. Let's try and collect these. It's going to kill him off.
I'm looking at the link now. Oh, look at that bag of comics.
A bag of comics, and these are the reprints. So don't get too excited by that 35-cent edition. And there's quite a few of these. Yeah, I mean, so they are hard to find. You probably won't find them.
When do these come out, Pete? Because
there's a Star Wars #1 in that 1, 2, and 3, and it's got 35 cents in it, which would be worth quite a lot of money, as we'll come to in a minute. But obviously that was a reprint. So
but if it says it's 1977 on the archive. It says the year it was released. Surely that's not. Is that the year the reprints were released?
Star Wars was a monster for Marvel. Absolutely huge. I said it pretty much saved the company. So these things were getting printed and then reprinted, and then another edition was getting printed. It was huge, absolutely huge. I mean, all I could find out is that these came out in those early days. They started putting these together, because then he got to like the 33, 30. That's a bit bizarre. So 33, 35, and 36. A bit strange. And see that? It's like, oh, okay, that's odd.
Yeah, you don't get the full. You miss a bit of the story there, don't you?
Yeah, well, it's 34, man. I've no idea what it was in those particular comics, but this is the later run of not very good stories. But
that doesn't even tie in with the movie adaptations, does it? Because The Empire Strikes Back picked up in issue 39, so it would have been logical for the Polybags to have had issues 1 to 38 covering the Star Wars time. But no, it's not that either. Don't know.
No, they just on a random. Now, I mean, I was looking at some of the interviews and some of the people like Charles Lippincott giving information. It seemed like the world of comics is very up and down. But when the comic was being put together, there was a real hurry to it. Let's just get this stuff out. Just put it in bags. Just get it out there, flog it, whatever. So there's no. It seems that there's no rhyme and reason to some of these comic releases. I think it was just various. I would imagine it's the distributors who were knocking this stuff out. They even bagged at the Return of the Jedi comics as well. But this is more sensible. They had 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, which is a little bit odd. You're thinking, again, this time you've got Marvel Comics under the auspices of Marvel Books. And you've actually got a nice little bag. It actually looks like they've actually done something sensible this time. Looks like they probably got their act together, and this is something they were probably doing, actually putting comics in there. But you've got, it's just under the Marvel kind of banner. 2 comics for 1 something at 9. So
39.
It could be 39. I couldn't quite.
The next one's 149, isn't it? The what is difference between all those? The oddest one with the 3 non-consecutive issues, that's the Whitman product one, isn't it? So Western Publishing Company. So I wonder if they not really bothering to honour Marvel's stories, are just chucking anything together. All the others are actually Marvel related, aren't they?
I was trying to find the history of bagged up comic things, and it's like didn't seem to be any particular sense to this stuff. It seemed, like I said, some of the distributors were putting this together. Some of the shops were, the big comic book shops. Obviously, there was big shops at the time, big stores that were selling comics. You might find this on, Walmart or something. There didn't seem to be a definitive list anywhere, unless I've just missed it, couldn't find it. But but then with this Return of the Jedi ones, it seems more sensible. You got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But again, why don't you put all 4 in a bag? Was it that hard? Was it making that much money? I don't know. But yeah, it was an odd one that they didn't put that in the run. So they wanted a different set of comics. They wanted those comics to be individual and not part of the run.
Were those bagged copies reissues though, Pete? Because Return of the Jedi was a bit of an oddity, wasn't it? Return of the Jedi stepped out of the normal numbering. Because the whole series was number 1 to number 107, but Return of the Jedi, they did separate issues outside of that numbering. So it was Return of the Jedi number 1 to number 4, and they came out October 83 to January 84. So presumably you had individual issues in October, November, December, January. So I would imagine they must have been released monthly. You wouldn't have had the first 2 bagged and then waited 2 months to get the next 2 bagged.
Yeah, I don't think these came out. I doubt very much these came out at the time. I'd imagine these came out to just enforce it, because when these comics are out, we didn't have video, we didn't have DVDs and all that sort of stuff. So you had to wait for the film to be in the theatre to kind of get your fix of Star Wars. So this is why these comics are kind of like released over and over again, because it was like people forgot about Star Wars. Let's get it back in there. Someone's put it on the theatre again. Get the comics back in there. There wasn't, that was the only way you were going to get your fix. So I'd imagine they came out as a monthly comic, and then they went, right, let's get back in the public eye. Let's bag these 2 up. We've had these 2. Let's put these back out again. There were a few other odds and sods. We have covered these recently. The Marvel Illustrated books, Star Wars 1 and 2. Great covers. Definitely check them out. Beautiful paintings. Leia standing over Darth Vader. Looks like she's killed him. Good on her. A bit of a fight going on in space. And then, of course, the famous hand shooting Chewie in the back. Oh, you traitor.
Why is Sam shooting Chewbacca in the back? That just doesn't.
Jason needs to read his Marvel comics rather than just buying them all, because that's a scene from The Wheel, Jason, with Han shooting Chewie.
I'm having enough trouble just getting the ones I've got and sticking them into baggies. It took me about an hour to bag up about 100 of them yesterday or the day before. So get around to reading them at some point.
Yeah, do it.
Jason, The Wheel store is brilliant. You'll love it. Actually, do you read comics at all, Jason? Just out of interest. Have you ever read comics?
I read 2000 AD as a kid, and I've got all the graphic novels for that and stuff. So yeah.
What's your favourite character 2000 AD, Jason?
De'Aaron Quinch.
De'Aaron Quinch. You're like my brother. He loves De'Aaron Quinch. He's not my brother's not really into comics at all. Right? He's just too busy. But he bought like the whole compendium of De'Aaron Quinch. It's like, what? Yeah, he goes, I used to read your 2000 ADs. My favourite characters. Great thing. Anyway, no one will know what we're talking about. So. And then book 2 is the World of Fire book. We have talked about it. I don't know why we've talked about it, but it's that wonderful cover with the wonderful Princess Leia in her green outfit, which is just sauce. And C-3PO look a bit odd. But anyway, right, we move on quickly. There were Star Wars Ewoks 1 to 14, and there were Star Wars Droids 1 to 8. But no one talks about those. No one. Anyone even read a Droids or Ewoks comic?
I have read an Ewoks one, and yes, you're right, they are awful.
Dreadful things. Right. Now this starts to get a bit saucy now, very saucy. Now, I think I have mentioned in the past, last few months or whatever, that they have actually done an issue 108. They released this last year. God, it's last year, crikey. And it feels like it was yesterday. Where they actually sort of carried on a bit of a story, and they brought some of those characters back into the fray, and that was a nice little kind of nod to the past. So I think they nodded to the past because they realised the past was better than what's currently going on. But that was quite a nice little thing to do, to actually release an issue 108 to sort of finish it all off. But yeah, that brings us to the issue 1. Now we've got to talk about issue 1 because we talked about this a long time ago. Grant brought it up because issue 1 of Star Wars in the States, this is where your money is and your cash. So this is where you got to watch out. Now I don't think you're ever going to find these out in the world because they're just not going to happen. But there were various versions of Star Wars number 1. I don't think we had too much in the UK. There's not a real collector's market out there for UK Star Wars Weekly number 1. I think you can if you get the free gift. It's worth a little bit of money, but it's not like some of these ones. So we had this 35-cent variant
That's
No,
where the money is, isn't it?
That's where the cash is. So it has the price at the top left, and it has 35 cents in a square, not a diamond, apparently. There is a barcode at the bottom left, and no word reprint is next to Luke Skywalker underneath the price. Does anyone know the kind of history of the 35-cent thing? Does anyone even know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know why it was a little bit more expensive, because the regular newsstand edition was 30 cents, wasn't it?
And they didn't do it just for Star Wars comics. They did it across the board. Apparently it was to test out the markets in certain places.
If people are willing to spend more for the same, then you charge more. That's just...
Very little apparently is really known about the Marvel 35 cents variants, even by hardcore collectors. So there we go. It hasn't been confirmed officially, but it is speculated that Marvel was test marketing 30-cent comics at the new price of 35 cents. Oof, as they had done testing 25-cent comics at 30 cents the year before. Marvel published a 35-cent variant for every 30-cent comic in production between June and October of 1977, totaling 184 titles. Which is like, oh, okay. And there's, I mean, it seems that the Star Wars one is the one that fetches the cash. There's all sorts of comics out there in this list. There's Spider-Man 2001 comic, I didn't know they made one. Avengers, there's just an absolute list. Black Panther, the Eternals. This Star Wars comic, this is one that goes for cash. Now, one went recently. Well, I say recently, June 2017. So I think that probably is after when Grant talked about it. So it's a 9.4 graded copy, and it sold for $25,000 in June 2017. That's not bad, is it, for a comic? It costs you 35 cents. You want a few of those lying around. Nice.
That would be a good loft find, wouldn't it?
Yeah, crikey, I imagine find a box of them.
Didn't Charles Lippincott find a big bundle of comics? I'm sure he put that up on his Facebook page. I don't know whether it was these. I think it was the regular versions. But yeah, crikey, find a pile of those, you'd be quids in, wouldn't you?
So we have that edition, which is beautiful. Obviously, the normal 30-cent newsstand kind of like edition, which is pretty much the same thing, apart from the words. You might have reprint on the front. You have obviously the reprint in the bag of the 35-cent edition, but obviously it's just a reprint, so it's not worth anything. And there was also, let me get this right, there was a reprint without the word reprint, which is nice. And the 35 cent was in a little diamond. Luke Skywalker in the top left-hand corner looks very nice without that word reprint in there. Looks very fancy. His red lightsaber. Obviously evil. And then we had a few other versions. I won't go through all of them because you can find this out yourself if you want to. There are a few others that are worth a little bit of cash. Nothing majorly ridiculous. It seems like issue 2. There's a few versions of that, and that can go for a good graded version. In the sort of £400 editions. There was a Star Wars comic number 4 regular edition and price variant. Again, 30 cent and 35 cent, and that's pretty valuable. 10 grand. Was one of them, and the cover is absolutely stunning. It's the one with Darth Vader, and he's very pink, and he's kind of got his hands over the top of our heroes, sort of like trying to get hold of them. But that variant, $10,000 that went for not too long ago in 2016. So that's nice. It seems to be the first appearance of Boba Fett seems to do well in the market now. I think I've seen these in shows and stuff. It's basically Boba Fett, Dengar, and Bossk, and it is number 42, and it can go in the high hundreds if you've got a good quality edition of it. And then there was supposedly going to be a bit of a rush on issue 49, which was going to have, because it had the word The Last Jedi on it, but unfortunately no one really was that interested. But people started buying it apparently in bulk, so I started getting this comic, going, right, this is going to be worth a fortune. It's got the words Last Jedi on it, so we'll get loads of these in, and no one liked Last Jedi, and that was the end of that little run of things. But you get good quality versions for like $70 if you want, if you're into those sort of things. And there's a bit of a price run on the Boba Fett cover, number 68, and again in good condition. You get it for several $100s. And of course the last issue, it actually says the words last issue on it, number 107. That can fetch a little bit of cash if it's in a high grade. So if you're into that sort of thing, you can find these things. I guess over time some of these things will get rarer and rarer as we they get torn apart or lost or decayed or whatever. I actually found it quite hard to find these on eBay to buy. Not these rare ones, but just in general. I mean, I've had a few of these comics. I remember I gave a few to Grant actually. If I keep them, I'll have to collect them, so I better give them away before I get into that sort of trouble. But yeah, they're not the easiest comics to get hold of over here, which is unusual, really. I guess because we were swamped by UK weeklies, it's actually a little bit of an effort. So if you do want to start collecting the Star Wars American comics, you are going to be spending a bit of money. Guys, do you know anyone who's got the whole run of this? Do you know collectors of this, just out of interest?
I think Brian Cameron from Thundertracks has got a full run of them.
Spoons, you're quite a sort of like comic person. You might have a look at shows and stuff. Have you ever had a thought about maybe buying a few at a show? Is it?
I am very easily led, and don't tell Richard, but I just had a little quick look on eBay myself to see how easy they are to find, and they do appeal actually. So I don't think I'd be interested in putting a full run together, but something iconic like issue 1 and the variations on that with the different prices on the 35 cents in the square or the diamond, that does actually appeal. So not so much to read these ones, but to actually just collect as a bit of vintage Star Wars history. That does appeal. But as you alluded to before, if you start down that road, could I really just stop at issue 1? I could see myself needing to put a run of these together as well. But yeah, I am tempted. And I think if I was certainly over in the States in a comic shop, I would be looking to see what they have. In fact, there is a little vintage comic shop in Sheffield. I might once this crisis is over, I might pop back in there and see what they've got in the way of US issues, because they do appeal. And but whatever we feature on here, I'm always tempted to start buying them. So it doesn't do my bank balance any good.
There is another Marvel thing out there that might tickle your fancy, and I never heard of it. It was called Pizzazz. Anyone heard of Pizzazz? Just out of interest, Pizzazz.
I hadn't until I did my research for this this feature. But
what have you found in the word of pizzazz?
Well, Pizzazz was the first place that Star Wars comics actually appeared, I think, or certainly stories that were not directly adapted from the films.
Correct.
So this was original content.
First non-canon Star Wars appearance.
That's it. And Pizzazz was it was a kids' magazine, I think, wasn't it? So you had various different bits of content designed to appeal to kids. It wasn't just a comic book. It was obviously produced by Marvel. It only ran for 16 issues. It started in October 1977. It ran until January 1979. And each issue had got just 3 pages of Star Wars. They started off with the Keeper's World story, which took up the first 10 issues. And then the Kingdom of Ice, that was in issues 11 to 16, but they stopped midway through. So anybody who bought the first 16 issues and was desperate to find out what happened in the Kingdom of Ice story, they couldn't in America. What they could have done was come over to Britain, because Marvel UK had the Kingdom of Ice, and that was in Star Wars Weekly, issues 57 to 60. US readers, they didn't find out the end of that tale until 1981, and they had to buy a special paperback Marvel Illustrated book where that story was reprinted. So, long time to wait if you were on tenterhooks wondering what was happening to your heroes.
Pizzazz. See, you'd have to say that when you ask of it, the news agent. Have you got a copy of Pizzazz? Because you wouldn't better say it any other way. But what I love about Pizzazz, now you can go and find this on Rebel Scum. They've actually got a whole archive of all the covers. Is, you see, my Spider-Man as a kid was that really bad costume on those sort of TV movies, and obviously Incredible Hulk TV series. And those covers are just full of those things. All my favourite things. Again, if I'd seen Pizzazz, I would have been well up for it. They had all my favourite stuff: Superman, Battlestar Galactica. Not sure about Grease though. Wasn't really into Grease. I had a look to see if I could find one. They are quite expensive. Well, if you want to, you have to buy it from the States. There weren't any in Europe. I think there was one edition which was like currently going for about £25. I don't really want to spend that much on Pizzazz. I'm not sure what you could call them massively collectible. Someone obviously wants to buy them, but there's one for you and Mr. Spoons in the States. See if you can find a Pizzazz.
The run of 16 that appeals. That's a nice run to do. I think I just having a look at some of the images online. It's only a couple of them that actually have the Star Wars imagery on the front. Like you, very fond memories of the Hulk and Spider-Man live action shows. Not I can't see myself. So just looking at Pizzazz number 5, Linda Ronstadt on the cover, £11, £23 postage. I can't see myself splashing out for that. Likewise, Grease.
Yeah.
Meatloaf on one of them. And
Meatloaf is what every kid aspires to, isn't it? Really, Meatloaf.
And someone with a leopard on his shoulders. I don't recognise him. So I could see one or two, but probably there's a few British runs. I'm more likely to put a run of Starburst together than Pizzazz to be.
Starburst. Now there's something to talk about one day. I used to dream of Starburst magazine. I think I only ever saw one edition as a kid, and then the news agent said, "Well, no one buys it, so not stocking it anymore." I was like, "Oh, okay." And that was the end of that. Technically, it's not in our vintage era, but it is 1987. And, let's face it, there's not many podcasts that talking about like the dark times. But Star Wars 3D, have you ever even heard of this? I do actually have all 3 of the comics they released. I can afford them to you if you've got a pair of 3D glasses. But yeah, these you have even heard of Star Wars 3D?
New one on me, Pete. I think you're on your own here.
No, was Star Wars 3D. You didn't sit there with Star Wars 3D. I mean, 1987. I mean, goodness sake, that was really after the horse had bolted, hadn't it? Let's face it, no one was doing anything Star Wars in 1987. Goodness knows where on earth this was. But this is a company called Blackthorn Publishing, right? And they had an absolute ton of 3D comics. So they were obviously onto something. It didn't last very long, sadly. Blackthorn Publishing, they kind of, as you can probably imagine, went out of business. They lasted for 3 years, and then they went defunct in 1990. But they had an absolute enormous catalogue of comics, basically. They had a lot of original comics, which absolutely none of them I've ever heard of. Anyone heard of Hamster Vice? Miami Vice parody, 6 issues. Street Wolf, that only lasted for 3 issues. Now this is one for Jason. I think I'm sure he's going to go on eBay straight away and try and find this one. Twisted Tantrums of the Purple Snit. Only lasted for 2 issues though.
That's a mouthful.
Anyway, apart from those absolutely staggering comics, which I'm actually almost like tempted now to go and find the Twisted Tantrums of the Purple Snit, all 2 issues of it. Apart from those amazing things, and they did have a lot of them, so they were obviously churning this stuff out. They did a lot of 3D comics of famous licensees. So they had all sorts of stuff like, again, one of your favourites, Mr. Spoons, Rocky and Bullwinkle in 3D.
I did used to like Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah, well, I could guess that. Dick Tracy, the Flintstones, G.I. Joe. Hamster Vice again, that managed to go 3D. You see, it's Hamster Vice, the Miami Vice parody.
Let's go back to the Star Wars ones. What the stories in them? Were they rehashes of the Marvel ones, or were they brand new stories?
Right at the end of the run, and I can't remember what the name of those awful characters. It's right at the end when the art looked awful. But hang on a minute, Rambo 3.
Hoojibs. Got to be Hoojibs.
No, not Hoojib. No, that was way after. This is way after that. But yeah, it's right at the end of in the Return of the Jedi run. Awful artwork right at the end. Blue-skinned people, I think it was. It's absolutely awful. It really was.
I've still got some of the vintage 3D glasses from back in the day. I'll be able to read these.
It was a story out the back end of the Marvel run, which they probably didn't cost them like more than 50p to get that licensee. I mean, absolutely dreadful. Hang on, wait, but I haven't finished with some of these blooming awful comics. I mean, amazing comics from Blackthorn. Sad Sack 3D. What's that? Anyone heard of that? Well, they had Transformers in 3D. But that's pretty collectible. Only 3 issues again though. Not many. Yeah, and they had things like BattleTech and just awful. Dick Tracy seems to be a big thing with them. They had Rambo and Rambo 3, but not Rambo 2. So there was missing Lauren Hardy 3D comic. But yeah, that is something. It is 1987. I know it's out of our remit, but I think that's something. A cheeky little run. Only 3 comics, and in 3D, Andy. I think that is something worth starting off your US Marvel run.
Yeah, I could be tempted. Come back in a year and we'll see how it's done.
No. Next month. I want you to do a Jason. Next month, I want you to be ploughing through these. Well, I've just bought a box of US Star Wars comics. They're coming by shipping container, and they're going to be absolutely amazing. If anyone actually has a Star Wars 3D comic and wants to sell it, I'd be quite tempted, actually. I'm quite intrigued now. I loved 3D as a kid. I don't know if you did. I was obsessed with 3D. I used to just try and draw 3D. You got an acetate sheet or whatever, or a bit of tracing paper, then you try to draw the same image and then put it across, and it never worked. But I lived in hope. Being able to do that. 3D was great. But it came back recently with films. But you could even buy 3D TVs, but they seem to have people have had enough of them. Did anyone used to struggle with 3D stuff? My eyes used to go wobbly. I used to look at 3D for too long.
No, never really appealed. I remember the films. It was like Jaws 3D, and was it Towering Inferno? There's one of those kind of films where the lift came down in 3D, but they're only ever sort of shown on in old school TVs. So it just always looked a bit weird. I never actually saw them in the cinema in 3D.
Yeah. I never went to cinema and watched a 3D film as a kid. I never did that. I don't remember them ever having. I remember my mom saying, "Oh yes, we went to the cinema when she was younger." I'm thinking, what? I thought 3D was like a new thing in like the 1970s, 80s. I didn't realise it was like some old fogies thing,
Never really taken. I mean, before Disney took over, they started showing the prequels in 3D. I remember going to see The Phantom Menace.
Yes.
In 3D, and then thankfully Disney came in before the Attack of the Clones could be shown, and it's just something that's never really appealed to clearly many people, has it? It's not, as you say, the 3D TVs never took off. 3D is just a novelty for each new generation. The kids go, "Oh, 3D, that'll be good," and then realise it isn't, and then it dies a death again, doesn't it? It's
Until you don't need to wear glasses, it's never going to happen. That's the worst thing. Going to the cinema, and as a glasses wearer myself, you have to wear another pair of glasses on top of your glasses, and your nose starts to hurt. And then you get really fed up, and you go, actually, this film's not even 3D friendly, so it's totally pointless. If you're going to have a 3D film, you need things to be flying in your face all the time. And even then, after a while, you go, a bit bored of this.
I am disappointed you didn't mention Duckbots, though, from Blackthorn.
What? Duckbots?
Duckbots.
What? That sounds amazing. What is it?
Those 2 issues followed Doggeroo, 1 issue, Duckbots. we know someone not too far away who might like Duckbots.
Yeah, maybe we should give him for his birthday, whenever that is. Is he allowed birthdays? Will he get beaten up on the street for having a birthday? I'm not sure. What happens these days up north? You having a birthday, man? Why, you soft lad. I'm going to give you a kick in the wee-wahs. Alien Ducklings as well. Oh, my word. I'm liking some of these titles, these some original titles. Preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroos. How did that not take off?
So, it sounds a totally different kind of publication, that one.
Now that one's definitely a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ripoff, isn't it?
It even says it. It even says it by the side. It says it is a complete ripoff. I'm intrigued by that. That sounds brilliant.
Roach Mill. Have you seen that one? It looks like the Punisher, but with 6 legs.
Being from Somerset, I've got to say the best sort of Blackthorn is the sort that comes in a glass.
Indeed, and that's a good way to finish. I think let's go and get absolutely drunk.
Hi there, I'm Mike Quinn. You'll know me as Nine Numb in the Star Wars saga, and you're listening to The Vintage Rebellion.